Good afternoon. Welcome to Five on Friday for today. This is the first one I've done in a couple of weeks now because I was at Voices on the Coast a couple of weeks ago, and then I was in Sydney last week. So I've been doing quite a bit of travelling around the place talking about raising readers and speaking at various things. I've got lots of events coming up as well, and they're all listed on my events tab of the blog. Next week I will be at the Gold Coast. I'm talking at a Gold Coast Teach Librarian network meeting, and I'm also going to be at St Finbarr's at Ashgrove, and I've got various other public events coming up, including some really great ones during Book Week, and Your Kids Next Read live event with Alison Tate and Alison Rushby, which I'm really looking forward to. So if you're based in Brisbane, that would be a really lovely one to come along to. There'll be prizes and all sorts of things. So it should be good. So thank you for your patience with my Five on Fridays. Can someone just give me a thumbs up or something that they can see me okay? Because on my screen I look a bit pixelated, which is probably a good thing because I've got this weird eye situation happening, possibly dermatitis either around my eyes or on my eyeball. Who even knew that was a thing? And my eyes are red, puffy and horrendous. So it's probably not a bad thing that I'm looking a bit pixelated, but if someone can just let me know I sound, you can hear me, and that the quality of the image is okay, that would be fabulous. So the 5 books that I'm going to talk about today are an eclectic bunch. Some of them have just been released, and some of them have been out for a while now. One of them's been out for quite a while now, but they're ones that I've either discovered this week or discovered in the last few weeks or have had for ages now and just have never had the opportunity to talk about. First one I want to show you is the absolutely stunning Snoozette, which is written by Valentine Paradis and illustrated by Caterina Metti. I am sure that I've probably mispronounced those names, and I'm so sorry. It's from a boutique publishing house called Red Paper Kite, and I am absolutely loving the books that are coming out of this publishing house. Some of you may have seen Hugo, particularly if you are subscribe to Riverbend Standing Orders, which I get in my school library. The wonderful Trish and Pauline put Riverbend Standing Orders together, and I really like them. I've discovered some really interesting books through them. Snoozette is, as you can see, really large. It's actually the size of like a kid's scrapbook, and I wondered, you know, if that's part of the what they were aiming for, because as I go through the book, you'll see what I mean. The end papers are just sumptuous. These are probably some of the best end papers I have seen in recent children's book publishing history. What I love about them so much is that they show the journey of the book. They've got the colour palette, they've got sketches and roughs. To me, they're just utterly exquisite, and you could look at them forever and ever, and I have done. My favourite is the illustration of the cupcake, and I was discussing that with my students at school. I think it's a lemon cupcake, but my kindy boys and girls were pretty convinced it was a rainbow orange cupcake, but I think it's a lemon cupcake. I'm convinced it's a lemon cupcake. Anyway, so it is enormous and it is beautiful. This is just the most like beautiful coffee table book, but it's so much more than that. Snoozette lives in a place where clouds are always in season. It's always a little bit rainy and miserable where she is, and the only clouds she actually really likes are the ones that whistle out of her kettle, which you can see in the illustration there. I absolutely love that, and I've got a lot of friends that drink a lot of tea, so I imagine anyone that loves tea will love this book. She spends her days making endless cups of tea. In fact, she brews melancholic tea blends, and I noticed on her shelf here, she's got Sencha tea, which is my favourite tea. On multiple rereadings of this book, it's really important to have a look very closely at the illustrations. When I'm reading a picture book for the very first time to a group of students, I always say, my job is to read the words and your job is to read the illustrations. But on a first reading, I always just read the story through quite naturally so that they get the flow of the story. There's nothing worse than stopping a story and saying, oh, and did you notice this, 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 and this? You can do that on the next time you read a story, which is why, so I've read Snoozette a couple of times to my kindy kids, for example, but the first time you read it through, I think it's really important you get the beauty of the language and the rhythm of the language happening. So anyway, she brews melancholic cups of tea. She speaks French to her lunatic cat, and the author is French. The illustrator, I'm not sure what nationality she is, but she lives in Italy now. And she practices for the speed napping world champion title. So these are things that she fills her day with. And then there's this one very peculiar day where all of a sudden, so all of her days are the same, they're filled with napping. And then there's this very one peculiar day where she started walking across the sky. And then we move into this very surreal world. And for any art students out there or art teachers, particularly I think even high school teachers, this has got some really surreal, almost Salvador Dali type elements to it. And I think it would be a beautiful one to study. There's lots of elements in the book that are as good for the children as for the adults. I really love the way she snatches the clouds out of the sky. There's a few things I really love. I love the clouds hanging on the line. So in here, we're kind of in a dream sequence, and Snoozette's dream just gets crazier and crazier and more surreal. She makes air de rain, and she, there's something about fairy floss that I really like. Her fairy floss is deliciously weird. And it's just, oh, look, it's just exquisite. The illustrations are superb. First time I read it, I was like, are children going to understand this? But you know what? It was pitch perfect. I've read it to kindergarten children and I've read it to grade 5 and 6 students, and they have all absolutely adored it. I have had it on my kitchen table for a few weeks and I've been reading it over breakfast, and every time I look at it, I just notice more and more elements in it. This is my favorite illustration, probably because I love cakes and cupcakes in particular. I used to spend a vast amount of time making cupcakes, and I also love a bit of a bouffant hairdo, so that's my favorite page. It's just exquisite. It's basically Snoozette's dream sequence, I suppose, and then she, oh, look at it. It's just so gorgeous. Anyway, and then she wakes up. She woke up with a jolt, drenched but with a twinkle in her eye. It was time for a cup of tea and perhaps a nap after. So ends the story. But then there's wait, there's more. But then there's this little comment here from the illustrator. This is Caterina Metti. I illustrated this book. In the next few pages, I have shared some of my sketches and would like you to be the artist. What colours would you choose? Invent a new caption too. Make this book truly yours. And the publisher I read on the publisher's website that as a child she used to draw in her picture books and get into trouble for it. I did exactly the same. A lot of the picture books that I have from my own childhood have got my scribbles all through them. And so she had this idea with her publishing house that she wanted to create books that children could then make their own. And oh my glory, look at it. There's like 4 pages of, I guess, roughs from the book, which children can illustrate and make their own. And then there's another utterly gorgeous end paper. To me, this is the most unbelievably perfect giftable book. I've had a few librarians and I discussing it the other day, what do you do with it in a school library? Copyright would tell me that I can't photocopy those pages and distribute them, but I think I could use them in the library. I think I could photocopy maybe one of the colouring pages and colour those in the library. It's absolutely exquisite. I can't recommend it highly enough. I love the size of it. I love how giftable it is. I love the emphasis on the importance of imagination and dreaming, and I love the cups of tea. I love Snoozette the character. She's gorgeous, and I just really love the interactivity of the book, that there's space for children to colour, and also that there's space allowed in the text and in the illustrations for children to add in their own ideas of what might happen in their own dreams. And I love the end papers. To show the workings of the illustrations in progress on the end papers is truly genius. So I've spoken about that one for a really long time, so it's about that, but it is beautiful. Highly recommended. Okay, my next one is As Happy as Here. It's the latest book by Jane Godwin, someone who I just really, really admire. She's been in the children's book industry for a very long time now. She has, I think, over 25 books. and she has been a publisher. She was, I think, the brains behind the Our Australian Girls series. She was certainly very heavily involved in it. She also mentors a lot of upcoming authors, and she works with a lot of schools, and she does some work with Alison Lester, the illustrator, in Indigenous communities. She's just an all-round excellent bloody person. She's really interesting to follow on Instagram. I really enjoy following her musings on the children's book industry and her own life. And I love everything she writes. One of the things that I always notice with the Jane Godwin book is this incredibly authentic voice in all of the characters. Many of you will know Gogo and her Silver Shoes, and you know, from Gogo to all of those other picture books she's written, to her middle grade stuff, to her young adult stuff. The characters are always incredibly authentic, natural. She just absolutely nails whatever voice she's writing, whatever age she's writing. And you know, there's a real spunk to all of her characters as well. None of them are twee. You can imagine all of them jumping off the page and being your friend. They are all damn excellent characters. Now in this book, this one is for readers from, say, maybe 11, I'm going to say. Evie is the main character, and the voice is of Evie. Evie is in hospital after having been hit by a piano in a car accident. How on earth Jane Godwin thought, oh, I think I'm going to have my main character hit by a piano is anyone's guess, but she makes it work. And in hospital, Evie meets Gemma, who's pretty worldly and tough. She's grown up in, I've had to write the characters' names on the back. She's grown up in a pretty tough environment and is very worldly, slightly older than Evie, I think. And then there's also Lucy, who comes across as quite negative, but I think she's quietly calm and has quite a great inner strength. She also has a really lovely dad who I really liked. So there's these three characters in hospital. They're all tweens, and in outside life, these three girls would not be friends on any level. But, you know, it's interesting in a hospital, isn't it? You are often placed with people that you wouldn't normally be sitting next to or lying next to. You're very vulnerable in hospital, and contact with the outside world is often reasonably limited, and life is taken at a much slower pace. So I think it's quite a clever device to set the story in a hospital and put this interesting group of characters together. The characters are bonded together. The three girls are bonded together when they witness a crime. They watch from their hospital window a man bury a newspaper in the park downstairs from their hospital ward, and they go and grab this paper, and they realize they're witnessing a crime. The story goes on to this really quite ultimately heartbreaking conclusion almost. It doesn't happen until right at the end of the story, and I really wondered where the story was going. And it is heartbreaking and tough, but it is, as with all of Jane Godwin's writing, it's just kind of glorious. It just works. So my 11-year-old has nominated this one of, oh, there she is walking past the door, nominated this as one of the best books that she's read this year, along with Sick Bay by Nova Wheatman. And interestingly, Sick Bay and As Happy As Here both kind of use that illnessy thing. Hi, do you want to come around to the, no, you cannot get the blood orange. No, my 11-year-old is now making herself afternoon tea. That's going to work with the noise. I'm actually on a video, girls. Go back and do something else for 5 more minutes. So my next book is, kids. My next book is Don't Follow V, and ironic that I'm talking about my own children and social media as I'm talking about this book, except my own children aren't on this social media. So Don't Follow V is by Oliver Pomervan, and it's absolutely brilliant. I love Oliver Pomervan books, and on the inside jacket of this one you can see his titles. He's got Con Nerd and Natural Born Loser. He's the master of kind of the funny but heartwarming book. And can you not take a blood orange into the playroom, because that's just going to end really badly? Yeah, welcome to my life. That's going to be a really sticky mess for me to clean up later. So in this one, Don't Follow V, which was the first one I read, and then I read it again when it was rejacketed. V is... She has this mum who, honestly, V wakes up every morning and she's got a camera in her face. V's mother started an Instagram account for V when she was a baby, when she was born, called The Chronicles of V. And it's like her entire life is chronicled on social media. She has a lot of followers and is incredibly popular online. Not so much in real life, and that's where, now that V is starting to become a bit older, she's a bit of a teenager in this book, it's sort of starting to come unstuck for her, and she doesn't necessarily want to be online anymore, have her whole life online. Her mother always asks her on her birthday every year if she is still happy for V to post her stuff online, but V kind of is conflicted. She knows this is her mother's kind of side hustle and she wants to please her mother. Mum's a single mum, and, you know, they get on really well. They actually have a really beautiful relationship, and it's this interesting look at social media and the intersection between social media and real life and how that can affect teenagers and tweenagers. It's got some great issues in it to discuss with that age group as well. It's one of those books that I think is a really nice one as your children enter into the world of social media to have a look at. It just raises all of those issues, but it's also very funny. And Oliver Pomervan, I just was saying that Jane Godwin is an interesting person to follow online. So is Oliver Pomervan, particularly if you like burgers. So Oliver Pomervan, this is him on the back of his book here. He eats a lot of burgers, and his Instagram kind of chronicles his burger eating adventures all over Australia. And look, I love a good burger. I'm more a fan of a grilled burger than I am a Betty's Burgers. Find those buns a little bit sweet. Top tip for Oliver. But yeah, Oliver Pomervan is a great person to follow on social media. Again, ironic to be saying that when he's writing a book about some of the pitfalls of social media. My next book is Too Many Friends by Kat Appel, another excellent person to follow on social media. Kat Appel is one of my favourites in the industry. She writes amazing verse novels for primary school aged students, and I've been lucky enough to have her at my school a number of times doing author visits. And in fact, it was her visit a couple of weeks ago, or last week I think it was, that prompted me to talk about this one again, because I haven't talked about it before on my 5 on Friday, although I have reviewed it on the blog, and it's probably one of my favourites. So in this one, Tani is in grade 2, and I've been reading this with my grade 2 students at school, although I always do this tricky thing where I read a little bit of the book and then I stop and say, and now you can borrow it from the library. And some of my grade 2 students have borrowed it from the library. But this one I've used up to grade 6. It's got applications much higher than, you know, the age of Tani, which is grade 2. So in this story, Tani has got too many friends, and that might seem an odd thing to write a book about when we often are concerned about children that don't have friends, but can actually be really tough navigating the playground when you're just one of those kids who naturally likes people and you want to be friends with everyone. And, you know, I don't know about you, but I spend a lot of time saying to my own children, just be friends with everyone, you know, don't hang around one person, spread yourself widely, make sure you're kind to everybody. And in Tani's case, that's what she's done. And she's finding herself a bit conflicted by the amount of friends that she's got. It's the most beautiful story, and it is told in verse. Now, there's a few reasons I love verse novels. And I was talking to my students at school about this in the lead up to Kat coming. Verse novels, I've always thought poetry was inaccessible for me. I didn't love studying poetry at school, and when I was a classroom teacher, I struggled to teach poetry. It just felt like I wasn't highbrow enough to understand poetry. Verse novels have changed all of that for me. So verse novels are free verse poems which, when put together, form a narrative. And I like to describe them as a chapter book, but all extraneous words completely removed, and you're just left with the heart and the soul of the story. I often end up crying in verse novels. They're so beautiful, often quite emotive. And I just, you know, I feel like people like Sally Murphy and Stephen Herrick and Kat Appel and Pip Harry are doing such great things in the verse novel space that I can't recommend them highly enough. There's also less words on the page, so for readers who are reluctant readers, it can be less overwhelming for them. They often do really clever things with the text on a page. Kat often has words, oh, we saw one there, going all over the place. There's Kat's two other verse novels, Bully on the Bus and On Track, both of which are fantastic and highly recommended. And Kat, last time she stayed with me, gave me this, I love this canvas. Kat lives on a cattle farm, and she gave me this canvas with a quote from one of her books. It says, "I don't eat my friends. The kids in my class are like a jumbo pack of assorted party lollies. They're all different, but I like them all." And that's one of the quotes from Too Many Friends. And I remember saying in my written review of Too Many Friends that I feel like this book is just utterly quotable. I feel like you could take the verses from this book and put them on walls in classroom as really, you know, incredibly quotable quotes. You know, even this one here, sharing. I like my friends. I like to be with all of my friends, but sometimes my friends aren't friendly with each other. You know, it's just, every word is perfect. She's done such a great job of it. And then finally, Waves, which is shortlisted in the non-fiction category of the Children's Book Council Awards this year. It's by Donna Rawlins, Heather Potter and Mark Jackson. It is a narrative non-fiction, so it is a non-fiction book, but it is told in narrative style. So the stories within it are told in narrative styles. This is my library copy, so it's covered in plastic. The end papers are really important as they kind of give the map of the entire story. So we start 50,000 years before present and we come up to the 2000s. So these are stories of people who have come from across the sea to Australia. And Donna Rawlins, the author, says at the end of the story, if you were not an Indigenous Australian, your family have at some stage come to Australia from across the waves. The characters in this book are fictitious, but the types of journeys they take in these stories were very real. And we start, so each double page spread tells the story of a different character who has arrived in Australia from far away via boat. And some of the stories are heartbreaking and you know, really quite devastating. This is, I think, a book for middle primary and up. This one, for example, was really sad. The story of Bridget. And then some of them are inspiring, some of them are stories of bravery, some of them are just really interesting, and it's all different types of people that are coming to Australia for all manner of different reasons. I just feel like it gives an incredibly great overview of how we all came to be in Australia, and it's fascinating. You know, Abdul is the last one. And just this first line is just beautiful. Mama promises we will go to school and be safe to walk on the street there. No bullets, no bombs pounding all night and day. And it's just, some of the stories are just heartbreaking and heartwarming at the same time. It's very beautiful. So that is my 5 books for this week. I highly recommend all of them. You can read more about each of them by clicking on the links in my caption for this post, and I will hopefully see you all again next week. I don't think I've got any reason why I can't do this again next week. So I'll see you all then. Thank you.